Hello, folks. This is Andrew Gilmore with another episode of Mostly Movies, Maybe Music. And my guest today is Manny Pacheco, who, as many of my guests are, is a film historian. He's also a writer, he's a radio broadcaster, he's a teacher, sometimes an actor as well, and probably a lot of other things I haven't found out about yet, but we'll see how that turns out. And I became aware of Manny because he was at a film festival that I go to every year, which I've spoken about on this show before. It's called Capital Fest, which is in Rome, New York, every August. And Manny was a guest speaker there. And unfortunately, I did not see his presentation there at the time. I was outside eating lunch, as it turns out, so I missed his speech. But then when I was on my way home from Capital Fest, I got a text message from our mutual friend Samantha Glasser, who's been on this show. And Samantha told me, hey, Manny wants to be on your show. So I thought, great. You know, it doesn't happen too often that somebody asks me to be on the show. It's usually the other way around. So I thought that's cool. If somebody's reaching out and they want to be here, then I should make that happen. So I reached out to Manny, and we did have some delays along the way to getting here. But long story short, he's here today, and I'm sure we'll have an interesting conversation. So thank you, Manny. It's a pleasure to meet you finally, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm out here in Los Angeles where it's been pouring rain all week, and I guess we're, what, 3,000 miles apart?
Yeah, well, it's raining here too, actually.
Wow, okay. Well, I'm happy to be joining you, and I'm really looking forward to talking about my franchise, Forgotten Hollywood.
Sure. What do you want to just start there and tell the audience what Forgotten Hollywood is about?
Well, it's a franchise of books, a podcast, a documentary that's in production, among other things. It's been a journey that I started back in 2009, and without trying to get too ahead of my skis, what I'd like to do is tell a little bit about me because I don't know
Sure.
where your audience is from. I would imagine it's a nationwide audience, but I'm here in Los Angeles, and you pretty much summed up what I do. I started my career as a radio announcer
Hmm.
on the historic KRLA, which is 1110 AM. It was a station that was filled with great radio announcers back that were big in the 1950s and 60s. And I kind of caught on at the tail end in the 80s as the kid DJ, working with really iconic radio announcers. Some of your listeners might have heard of the real Don Steele or Humble Harv, but I was hired by the legendary Art LeBeau, and that led to a 45-year career in radio. But I've always had a love of movies. In fact, a fanatical love of movies. And I began writing my Forgotten Hollywood series around 2009. Now, that was really fortuitous because about 2009, something you might have heard of, the internet came about. It
What's
began
that?
with, yeah, it began with YouTube and MySpace, and it allowed me the opportunity to be able to do a little bit more than just write books. So the franchise was born when I started writing my blog at ForgottenHollywood.com, and then later did a podcast that now on Spotify, 94 episodes that highlight, now wait for this, music and movies of the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it's pretty much what your show is about.
Yeah.
I was able to really take the magic of the movies and use sound as a way to transport us back to a time that can be considered forgotten. Now, why I called my franchise Forgotten Hollywood is because I really do spend a lot of time highlighting the supporting players of Hollywood's golden age. I know lots of books have been written about Bogart and Marilyn Monroe and
Right.
James Dean and Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn and James Stewart and the like. But I figured that many of these very familiar faces whose names appear below the titles of films actually very familiar if you see them on screen because they made as many movies as the top actors of the day, but their names are becoming rapidly forgotten.
Right.
So you might look at a Peter Lorre or an Andy Devine or a Marjorie Main and say, wow, they've been in a lot of movies. Alan Hale, Frank Morgan, Lionel Barrymore.
Alan
They've
Jenkins.
Yeah, Alan Jenkins is a great example because he's in one of my books as well. And I decided that they all had great stories to tell. So what I did is I took each actor, each supporting player, the character actors, and I created a chapter that ties Americana with Hollywood's history in what I metaphorically call Hollywood and Vine moments. And you'd be surprised how these supporting players became very, very important in the way we look at, for example, the Old West. Hollywood really painted a picture of the Old West that's never been accurate. But
Right.
Walter Brennan is quite accurate in the way maybe the Old West cowboys looked like. They surely didn't look like Gary Cooper or Errol Flynn or John Wayne or Randolph Scott. If you're doing a cattle drive, from one state to another that takes literally months and all you're eating is beans and coffee and you're on a dusty trail, you're hardly going to look as handsome as Randolph Scott or
Right.
Gary Cooper. But you might look a little bit like Gabby Hayes and Andy Devine and Walter Brennan. Well, there was a story to tell that Walter Brennan was really the face of what the Old West really looked like. And so I tell these kinds of stories. I tell stories about how actors um, ended World War II. It was Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet who had a hand in actually ending World War II. Now, they didn't know that they were involved, but they became involved, and it's a story that I tell in my books. Actors tangentially were involved with the Kennedy assassination
Hmm.
and the way we look at disability and why 1939 was such a magical year that had more to do maybe with Thomas Mitchell than it did with The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. So, I mean, these are the kinds of stories I like to tell, and they all resonate. And I'm up to like 76 different actors that I have actually highlighted in my books.
Wow.
I'm up to 4 books now, and I've got a fifth book coming out shortly. But I'm excited to share these stories because these are stories you don't hear from the regular stories that are being told, let's say on Turner Classic Movies. The TCM hosts like to tell very traditional stories. I like to do a deep dive. I like to go deeper into these stories and
Yeah.
about these actors that are really below the title of the films. So that I guess I was long-winded about this, but I think you have a better understanding now of what Forgotten Hollywood's all about.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. It helps me if I don't have to do any work. I can just sit here.
You can be a fan.
Yeah. Well, I was going to back up a little bit if you because you were talking about starting in radio. So, how did that start for you? How did you decide that that was something you wanted to do?
That's from a personal point of view. I'd love to share that story. I don't share it enough. I was a student at UCLA, and I was on my way to becoming a law student somewhere. I was a political science major. I was working at a student-based organization called Community Commissions. And basically, what I did is I was working to mentor high school students, students in need, disabled students, even young adults who might have gone the wrong way and ended up in prison. So I was very
Hmm.
much a social worker at the time. I was in college. But we had a radio station there. It was called KLA. And I found my way there, and magic happened. I fell in love with the theater of the mind, radio,
Yeah.
and what it could do. And so I learned just about every possible job that there is to radio, promotions, production, programming, what it means to be on the air, sales. And I eventually became the general manager of the radio station. Well, lo and
Uh-huh.
behold, I got a phone call during Christmas break my senior year, and it was KRLA calling, looking for a tall, not a tall, a young Latino who knew oldies music. Now, our staff consisted of 70 students. I was the only Latino, and I just happened to love oldies. So I thought it was a joke, but I come to find out that it was real. I sent in a tape, a demo reel, and they liked it enough to hire me, but not to go on the air. They hired me into the promotions department. But 1 year later, Art LeBeau, this legendary DJ who coined the term, by the way, oldies but goodies,
Hmm.
he's the man who created the oldies but goodies moniker. He said, I see something in you, Manny, that I don't see often. and I'd like to put you on the air. And so what he did is he put me on the request and dedication show that aired Monday through Friday, 7 to 11. And that began my career. And I've worked just about every genre of music since that time. I've done country music. I've worked soft rock, top 40. I've done news, and currently I do traffic at another legendary station, which has had the same format for a century plus. KNX 1070 AM 97.1 FM, and I'm a traffic reporter. So
Hmm.
I pretty much have done it all at radio, but I wanted to do more because it didn't include my absolute passion for cinema and film. But I was able to tie radio with film when I started doing my syndicated show that aired on the Financial News Network up and down the West Coast. And that syndicated show during COVID was transformed into my 94 episode podcast. I was at home, I was stuck. And so I took what is considered a traditional radio hour and I turned it into 42 to 47-minute podcasts. And fortunately, I saved that syndicated show and I was able to use them, repurpose them, and aired them on Spotify, and it got a pretty positive response from listeners of Spotify and from film fans. I went to the Turner Classic Movies Festival one year, and I got to meet a bunch of reporters, and they were just amazed at the content that I was putting out on my podcast, which, by the way, is called Manny Pacheco's Forgotten Hollywood.
Right. I was going to ask also, I assume that you're a fan of old radio, Jack Benny, and that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I'm glad you asked me that because I got to fulfill one of my dreams during podcast. Yes, let me answer your question first. Been a big fan of radio drama. I think that is really the beginnings of what we call theater of the mind.
Sure.
I mean, the highlighted, of course, was the War of the Worlds, but so many great shows from Box 13 to the Tales of the Texas Rangers. Of course, the Jack Benny, Burns and Allen, Fibber McGee and Molly,
Yeah.
Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy on the Chase Sanborn Hour. Yes, I was such a big fan that that was one thing that where I felt I was born too late, that I could never
Yeah.
be on a radio drama. And I figured that's a bucket list item that's going to remain on my bucket list. Well, it so happens that during COVID, there was a theater production company based out of Carlisle, Pennsylvania, that still wanted to do shows. They couldn't do them on stage because COVID wouldn't allow people to come into a theater.
Right.
So they instead decided to do a radio drama, and they reached out on Facebook a call. It was a voice call, a voiceover call for people to appear on this radio program that was going to air during Christmas. And so I applied. And when they hired their team, their actors, most of which, in fact, all but me, were from the east side of the Mississippi. So we had actors from New York, Connecticut, Houston in Texas and Louisiana, many actors, of course, from New Jersey and Pennsylvania, because this was based out of Pennsylvania. But I was the only actor they picked on the West Coast in California. And the show, of course, the all-time great, It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
And I really wanted to play Mr. Potter in the worst way. I have a real fondness. My documentary production is about Lionel Barrymore. I've had a deep-seated love of Lionel Barrymore's work and the talent that he had, and the idea of playing Mr. Potter really appealed to me. So I auditioned, and I got hired. And so when I spoke with the director, now you got to know that I'm 6'4" and my director's 4'11". We've never met in person, but she looks larger than life, and I look smaller on Zoom,
Yeah.
as you might imagine. But she's like, "Well, what do you see yourself as?" And I said, "Well, I would love to play Mr. Potter." She goes, "Oh no, you don't have the voice for." I said, "Well, I could create the voice. I mean, I am a voice actor." She goes, "No, no, 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 no." She goes, "I have something else in mind." I said, "Please, please don't tell me it's Uncle Billy. I would really be sad." She goes, "No, I think we found our angel. We'd like you to be Clarence." And I was absolutely delighted with that idea. I thought to myself, Clarence, of course. The good guy in the whole piece. The the one that really takes up the second half of the whole teleplay or screenplay, and in this case, a radio play. I said, I think I could do this. And as a matter of fact, when I finally wrote the chapter on Henry Travers in my upcoming book, I decided to personalize it and tell the journey of Henry Travers and my journey into It's a Wonderful Life to play Henry Travers's part as Clarence the Angel. I was able to check that off my bucket list, and that radio drama became my 94th episode on my podcast as well because they gave me permission to run it as part of my podcast. Now,
Oh,
in its original run, it ran on Broadway to Hollywood.com, over 100,000 views,
wow.
listens, and I was really blessed to play when you see the posters that promote It's a Wonderful Life, it's usually a picture of James Stewart and Donna Reed and Zuzu, but sometimes they actually show Clarence. And so the fact to be the face of one of the posters for It's a Wonderful Life, that was really a blessing. And COVID was horrible for lots of people, but it kept me busy in ways I never dreamed I could be. I was able to set up my podcast, and I was able to check off a bucket list idea to play in a radio drama. And so for that, I'm really grateful. Not grateful of COVID, but grateful of the
Right.
opportunity. So
Yeah, well, that's a good story. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah, sure.
Well, you mentioned voice acting, which is something we have in common. So tell me about that part of your career.
Well, mostly what I do is commercial work. I mean, I'm in Hollywood. I essentially I live in Orange County, which is just south of Hollywood, Los Angeles, and so I do a lot of voice work. I'm not as much as I'd like. That's one of the things that I underplay, as opposed to my teaching and my radio work. But I have been able to do a lot of really national commercials. I've done a Michelob Light commercial. I've done a Chevron commercial. I've done a Ford commercial. So I've been able to do commercials through my voiceover work. But I did sign in with a company, and unfortunately, it ended with COVID. A Canadian company who did voice work, and what they did is they had a company that was very unique. They helped people who wrote screenplays to put together little sizzle reels, like trailers that promoted their screenplay in digestible bites. In other words, if a screenplay runs an hour and a half, if a teleplay runs 30 minutes or an hour, they would put together 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 12 minutes of the screenplay, and they hired voice actors from around the country to voice these screenplay acts. And these were up and coming screenplay artists who wanted to work, let's say, in collaboration with the folks who created Star Wars or the folks who created the Marvel franchise. So they were writing screenplays that would be adaptable to these franchises, but we would be playing the voice actors. So I got to play a Jedi, for example, on a teaser for a screenplay. I got to play Tony Stark, who eventually became Iron Man, of course, in the Marvel series. I got to play good guys. I got to play bad guys. I got to play victims of monsters. I got to play all kinds of parts, and it was written by these up and coming screenplay artists, and some of them actually got their works produced, which is kind of cool. Of course, not with my voice, because then they would hire actors to actually do the show. But I was basically helping these screenplay artists along to get their work seen by the public. Now, not only did they hire voice actors in this company, but they were also hiring folks who created these background photos, the way they set up the how each scene is going to play.
Yeah,
And they also hired Foley artists, people who are good with sound effects.
right.
They hired music and musicians. They would buy music or hire musicians. So it was a full process of voice, music, Foley, and storyboarding, which was wonderful, and it really gave producers at movie studios an opportunity to maybe find their next talent. And I'm I thought it was a great role. You know, that was really a great assignment for me because they would give me, let's say, five, six, 10 assignments with every time they emailed me. And so I got to play different parts in a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun. But that ended when COVID ended, and I'm kind of disappointed about that. They were
Mm.
called Wild Sound, and they're based out of Canada.
Okay.
It was really a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that we have that in common. I started just fooling around with a tape recorder when I was a kid and kind of grew into voice acting from that. But
Sure.
anyway, I do want to get to movies, but there's one other thing, which is that I believe we've both done improv comedy. Was that part of your work as well?
You know, it is. And I never thought I was very good at it until I wrote my books. Now that's kind of a nice transition, but let me explain. I was young when I got into improv, and I was working with actors who were appearing in Little House on the Prairie, and they were appearing in other I don't know if you remember the movie Summer School with Carl Reiner and Mark Harmon and Kirstie Alley. Some of the actors who were doing the improv work that I was doing appeared in that movie. So I mean, I got to work with Hollywood actors. I got to really hone my skills, and it allowed me to think, boy, if I had another bucket list thing I'd like to do, I would love to be one of those opening, actors or comedians who open a game show, before the show
Right.
actually begins. Because what I found out in my work as an improv actor is that I'm not really good at creating comedy, but I am good at telling stories and I'm really good at listening. So I could create my comedy based on what somebody tells me
Right.
or shares with me. And that was my strength. Well, that sure paid off when I wrote my books because I started going to Rotary clubs and libraries and chambers of commerce. And I started speaking to these folks about my books. And I'm able to tell stories and I'm able to use the comedy, the humor that I obtain. And I especially used it when I get to the Q&A, when people start asking me questions. I can actually have some fun with the people who attend these events. And in teaching as well, my students, I'm able to really put together almost acts, but still curriculum as well, and still teach them while trying to make them laugh a little bit.
Right on.
And that's paid off really well because now I teach at three schools in Southern California. I teach at Mount San Antonio College in Walnut, California, Long Beach City College, and Rio Hondo in Whittier, California. So I learned that my comedic skills could actually be put to good use in front of audiences as diverse as students and Rotarians. And it really, really has paid off in the way I'm able to tell my stories from my books. That's been a blessing, and I didn't realize for 20 years how valuable that doing improv was, but it truly was another blessing along my journey.
Right. Yeah, I've been teaching for 17 years myself, and I know what you're saying. Teaching is a performance, and you're up there sometimes trying to get laughs, sometimes trying to give information, but you're telling a story, so you're absolutely right.
And you're trying to get the students engaged. I mean,
Yes.
that really is the goal. And as with an audience, you're always trying to engage your audience. So, I mean, yes, improv is something that is, everybody thinks of it in terms of one thing, stand up. But truth be told, improv comedy, is applied in so many different ways. If you go to a karaoke show and somebody is on stage performing, let's say a show tune, as opposed to a traditional song, I mean, that's a performance as well that you can apply improv skills as well. So there's so many ways to apply that talent, and I've been lucky enough to apply improv comedy to a lot of what I do. So it's
Yeah.
really been a blessing.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm kind of delaying the movie questions, but as long as I'm talking about the things that we have in common, do you want to tell me more about your teaching work?
Yeah, I teach media studies. I teach radio. I teach the history of radio, TV, and cinema, and of course they all tie together so well.
Yeah.
Radio and cinema have had a love affair since the late 1920s, as you know. TV was a little more problematic. The film studios saw television as a threat to folks going to the movies, and so they were not going to partner with television anytime soon until an actress named Lucille Ball decided
Right.
to upend what television meant and the development of the situation comedy. Also, the fact that the Dodgers lost to the San Francisco Giants with the shot heard around the world in the 1951 World, leading to the World Series. It was a playoff game that led to who was going to play in the World Series. That was watched by more people than the film moguls even dreamed, and they saw potential there at that point. And then it didn't hurt that also television was creating teleplays, and they were they were developing new actors who would later become great film stars. People like Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman and Eva Marie Saint and Eli Wallach and Ernest Borgnine and Rod Steiger. These were all actors that began in television. Anthony Quinn began in film, but he went to television as well.
James Dean.
James Dean, absolutely. Yeah, these actors of television became really a feeding ground to in development for future film stars, and all of them just about won Academy Awards eventually because they were so good. And so television became a partner, but it took a long time for cinema to see that partnership develop. It took probably 4 to 8 years. And but I teach that. I basically tell the stories of how radio and television partnered together. I'm sorry, radio and cinema partnered together, and how cinema and television were at odds. And then, of course, because I don't want it to just be a history class, I also spend the latter part of my semesters teaching the students of the new kinds of electronic media,
Right.
the social media, the internet, the idea of streaming, and why how streaming services like Netflix and Apple and Paramount Plus are at odds with traditional film studios in the way television was at odds in the 1950s. They haven't bought into that yet. They feel that the companies like Netflix is an intrusion to the film community, and though some directors and some producers and some actors have bought into it. I mean, Martin Scorsese is a great example of somebody who's bought into the streaming idea. Others are more traditional and want to stay away from it, like Steven Spielberg. So yeah, it's a way to teach my students about the history of media, but I also like to keep it current so they feel that they're engaged in the idea of maybe participating in the development of future media.
Right. And what kind of students do you get? What's the range of people like?
Well, they're all young. I mean, they're all anywhere between the ages of 18 and 60. I mean, I do get a wide range of students. I do get a diversity of students. A lot of, because of where I live, Southern California is very diverse, rich in diversity. You get a strong Latino community of students. You get Black students. You get Asian students who are fascinated with the future of media. You do get
Sure.
a big queer community. You just get a diversity of communities all in one classroom, and it allows for me to really tell stories that you might not think about. I'm not for example, the cinema professor that's going to just talk about Hitchcock and Frank Capra and James Dean and Marilyn Monroe. I'm not that one. I'm
Right.
going to be the professor that talks about um, uh, how makeup was developed by Lon Chaney, and then universal makeup, was put together by somebody who actually revered Lon Chaney and worked with Carl Laemmle to create the iconic images of Frankenstein or the Bride of Frankenstein or the Mummy or the Wolfman. I tell their story. I tell the story of fashion that was created by very unique fashion designers. I tell the story of Ray Harryhausen and how he was influenced by the making of King Kong and Willis
Right.
O'Brien. I tell what I like to do is I like to tell the forgotten heroes who were so Max Steiner. Is there anybody more iconic than Max Steiner? He created the modern day music composition with the way of taking each character and developing a song score for them. Not the movie, but for the individual characters. He worked on just about every film in the 1930s at RKO and the 30s, 40s, and 50s at Warner Brothers. I mean, just about every movie you see with Betty Davis has a Max Steiner score.
Right.
And really remarkable, as he was working on Gone with the Wind for Selznick because he was loaned out. Warner Brothers wasn't going to be easy on him. He had to work on three other films as he's working on Gone with the Wind, this gargantuan movie, 3.5 hours, and he had to create the score for that and three other Warner films. He was a remarkable, remarkable behind the scenes filmmaker, a craftsman. And so I like to tell those stories, and I think I like to tell the story of how television was born, and how NBC really was in battle with a Idaho farm boy, Philo Farnsworth. And that Philo Farnsworth was, in fact, the man who created television. So,
Right.
I mean, I like to tell stories of the names of the people they haven't heard. Because to me, you're not learning if I'm the fifth person talking about Orson Welles,
Right.
if I'm the 10th professor talking about Alfred Hitchcock. But if I'm the first professor to talk about Edith Head, then you're learning something. I think it's lazy to rehash what every other professor is doing. I think it's far more innovative and far more teachable moments when you are talking about these really iconic actors or behind. I love talking about, for me, the director that I really love to talk about, William Wellman.
Yes.
William Wellman has done so many iconic things that these students don't even know about that it just blows their mind. They just like, wow, he was the one that won the first Oscar ever? Yes.
Oh, that's
He
right.
was the one that, along with other directors like I'm trying to think of Raoul Walsh and King Vidor, helped create how movement and sound was going to be developed through the boom mic. He was the one that wrote A Star Is Born. He was the one that actually tackled social issues like hanging, lynching. He was the one that actually did a profile on one of the all-time great journalists of the 20th century, Ernie Pyle. I mean, the list, he discovered Gary Cooper and James Cagney essentially.
Right.
I mean, he made James Cagney a star as opposed to a bit player,
Yes.
and he discovered Gary Cooper. I mean, the list just goes on and on what this man does. Yet we rather talk about Frank Capra or John Ford, who are very remarkable directors, but they're always talked about. Who
Right.
talks about William Wellman? Well, I do. And these are stories that really fascinate my students, and I'm happy to share that with them.
Right. Well, that was something I was going to say about my classes is that I don't, I don't show Casablanca or the kind of standard movies like that. I like to go for the deep cuts myself. And I was going
Right.
to ask you if there are some deep cut movies that you would want to recommend to the people watching.
Well, when I do for my students, I do play a couple of movies. I do play the Oxbow incident. Number one, because my classes run an hour and a half, so you got to find a movie that's just about right. You can't have them stay over and then or miss the last 10 minutes, which maybe it's the impact of the whole movie. So the Oxbow incident is a tight 70 minutes. You can get it all in. You can talk about it. It's a great movie to tell because it has a social impact and it's got great stars and it also teaches the students that westerns weren't all that bad. They were actually very compelling. I also, at the end of when I started moving into the 21st century, I like to show them The Artist,
Yeah.
the movie that won the best picture of 2000, was it 9 or 11,
11, I
2011, I
think.
think. Well, the artist, what I love about that film is that it really is a homage not only to silent films, not only to the making of movies like A Star Is Born or Singing in the Rain, where the old actor and the new actor, how are you going to do the transition to talkies? That's an old formula for Hollywood. But it also, I mean, they use the score from Vertigo in one of the scenes. They do a scene where right out of Citizen Kane where they're having dinner together. The star and his wife, and they're cutting it to future scenes, just like they did in Citizen Kane. They're constant. There's one scene where the actress is sad and she says, "I want to be alone." Well, that's a Garbo thing, you know?
Right.
I mean, so they're constantly playing, and throughout the entire film, they keep saying, "Why won't you talk to me? Speak up. Why can't I hear you?" It's kind of they're making fun of the fact that it's a silent film. So I try to point that out to the students, and they get that filmmaking is more than just actors, that it's the whole process of the director, the cinematographer, the production designers, the makeup people, the costumers, the writers, the directors as well. So I mean, I think they learn from that. I'm hoping they do, and I hope that it kind of inspires them. You'd be surprised how many of my students want to be editors.
Hmm.
That's kind of a cool thing that they really want to get into editing, production through editing, trying to take a movie and trying to edit it to the director's vision. That's a that's a very I would think that would be a very fun job. And the fact that today's students are that savvy that they're looking at that, I think it speaks to the maturity of the Gen Z crowd, the youngsters. I always say that it was the millennials who created the internet, but they didn't know what to do with it. They created it, but they just didn't know what to do with it. It was the Gen Zs who knew what to do with it, and they're doing
Right.
remarkable things, I think.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go back a little bit and just ask you how you became so interested in movies in the first place. And do you remember the first movie you ever saw?
I think I do. Well, the first movie I ever saw in a theater. Let's do that one because that I do remember. Yeah, I my parents were really big on education. My mother, I mean, we were at a library just about every day. I mean, and during the weekdays and maybe even on the weekends. So my mom and my dad were really big on education. They wanted to instill the idea that you need to learn. But my grandmother, who was a lot more playful, she loved the humanities. She loved music. She loved television. She loved film. So I would go to their house, my grandmother's house, along with my uncles and aunt, and we would watch movies, and we would watch movies that were old, and they liked the monster movies, and not just any monster movie, but like King Kong or Mighty Joe Young. They were big on the ape movies, so I got to see that.
Sure.
But then we would watch Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Son of Kong. I mean, we would watch all these great, Fright Night chiller kind of stuff. And I wasn't a big fan of that, but as I got older and went to college, I'd still return to my grandmother's house, and now there was a new thing called Turner Classic Movies,
Right.
and we would watch, like the Betty Davis, Paul Heinrich kind of films, and I liked those a lot more. And I grew to love movies because of my grandmother. So I dedicated my first book, Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History, to my grandmother, and that was really fun. Now, the first movie that I ever saw, now it was in re-release. You got to know that because I wasn't born when it first came out. But my parents decided that they were going to take us to see, and I can still remember I was really young. I can still remember that they passed out a souvenir book, and it was a remarkable movie to start your life with, Around the World in 80 Days.
Hmm.
And boy, I mean, when you're seeing like every actor and they're all in small parts, and you see a Latino actor like Cantinflas and you're Latino, it really had an impact on me. And I think the second movie that I saw in a movie theater was Pinocchio. So, I mean, those were my first two. But later on, as we were starting to grow up, we would go to matinees and we would see a lot of Martin and Lewis, which I was not a big fan of. But as a
Yeah.
kid, you sat through and you laughed a little bit. And then I got to see a real remarkable, forgotten Hollywood find in 1964 when my parents took us to see What a Way to Go. And it's a movie. Now, get this. It's a movie that stars Shirley MacLaine, Paul Newman, Robert Mitchum, Dick Van Dyke, Gene Kelly, Robert Cummings, Dean Martin, an all-star cast
And Margaret Dumont.
and Margaret Dumont in her last screen role, as a matter of fact.
Yep.
And it's a movie that flopped because I think people were getting tired of the whole slapstick thing of it's a mad, 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 mad world and the great
Right.
race. It's a mad, 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 mad world is perfection. The great race, not as much. It's a problematic movie, but What a way to go, flopped. But I loved it, and I've always loved the movie, and now it's having a renaissance for some reason. People seem to like it a lot more. It was made by 20th Century Fox. It was a movie that was supposed to be designed as a vehicle for Marilyn Monroe,
Hmm.
but she died. And they said, who can replace Marilyn Monroe? We have nobody who has that 50s gravitas. I mean, I don't think Debbie Reynolds could do this part. I don't think it's the right role for her. She's too much of an ingenue. So they had to find somebody kind of sultry. And lo and behold, there was only one actress who could act. I mean, Lauren Bacall could have done it 10 years before.
Hmm.
But to me, Shirley MacLaine carries the movie. Dick Van Dyke steals the movie. And it's a remarkable comedy in my mind. I think it's really funny, and that was one of those movies that kind of defined me as a youngster. And then when I went to college, I started taking film classes, and there was this one film class that showed me some remarkable films, and they talked about the process of filmmaking with the use of these films, and they became some of my favorite films. One of them, um, well, of course, Citizen Kane, of
Yeah.
course. Of course. But one of them, and the name is escaping me for some reason, but you'll know it the minute I tell you. It's Lillian Gish and Robert Mitchum,
Oh, Night of
uh,
the Hunter.
The Night of the Hunter. That was a remarkably great film. And when they broke down the film as a film that had elements of film noir and German expressionism and how it looked at religion, to me, it's even a more remarkable film.
Yes.
Um, and that was just one of many films we saw during that semester that absolutely changed my way of looking at films and filmmaking. And I really was interested in writing about film, participating in the telling the stories of film. But then I got sidetracked with radio, and that had to
Right.
be put on the shelf for literally 20 years. But I came back to it eventually.
Right. So then, how did you get into writing?
Well, it was 2009, and I've always wanted to write. I wanted to write about Hollywood. I couldn't figure out the strategy. What was my angle? What was I didn't want my book to be I didn't want it to be Leonard Maltin. You write about Claude Rains. You tell his filmography, when he was born, when he was born, when he died, who he was married to. Leonard Maltin has already done that, and he's done that remarkably. I didn't need to be the second guy to do it.
Right.
So I needed to come up with angles about the actors, but it wasn't until I saw the HBO special Adams. Now you're going to say, what the heck? What does that have to do with filmmaking? Uh, Paul Giamatti is brilliant as John Adams. And as a political science major, I'm smart enough to know that John Adams is somebody they shouldn't have had to do a film about. I mean, if you're going to do a film about an A-lister of the American Revolution, you're doing it on Jefferson. You're doing it on Benjamin Franklin. You're doing it on George Washington. You're not doing it on John Adams. But they did. And that's when it hit me that you could tell remarkable stories about the folks that are not the frontliners.
Right.
They've got just as compelling stories to tell. And right then and there, I started writing, and the first actor that I wrote about was Claude Rains. I
Hmm.
said Claude Rains has had a remarkable career, a remarkable story, and it began with Claude Rains. My second subject was Lionel Barrymore, and then I proceeded on, and I've written about, I mean, so many Basil Rathbone and um, Gig Young and Gilbert Roland, Key Luke. I mean,
Oh,
I've written about so many of these great, John Quaylen.
yes.
Uh, I mean, there are just so many great, great actors that were part of the, let's say, the John Ford, stable of
Right.
stars, the Frank Capra stable of stars, the Preston Sturges
Yes.
stable of stars. There were so many of these great actors that I had to write about. I just have to figure out the angle. If I don't have the angle, I won't write about them. One actor I wanted to write about in my first book couldn't come up with an angle. I left him alone. I again wanted to write about him in my second book. Couldn't come up with the angle. I left him alone. Third book, same thing. Couldn't come up with the angle. He's going to be in my fifth book because I finally found the angle of Ray Walston. It took a
Ah.
long time to want to write about Ray Walston, but then my angle came about and it worked out.
Well, what is the angle?
Well, no, you got to read the book for that one. I'll tell you angles of my past books, but that one, the new one, I'll kind of hold off on that one.
Oh, okay, I was trying to give you an opportunity to plug it there.
Well, I can plug other actors in that book. I want to save the Ray Walston one though, because
Okay.
it's taking me so long. It's kind of like I'm treating it like jewelry, like I just uncovered a diamond.
Yeah.
But I mean, the new book that probably set for next year will be folks like Ida Lupino,
Oh,
Audie Murphy. Um, let's see who else. Louis Calhern.
sure.
And I also did a really interesting chapter on Robert Benchley.
Oh,
And I mean, there's 19 actors or performers. The one that I'm really proud of is the Ida Lupino because she was such a remarkable director
yeah.
as well as an actor who also had polio in the early part of her career. And it really that was a game changer for her, and not the way you think, because she survived polio, was not confined to a wheelchair, but during that time she had just signed a contract with Paramount. Well, she was incapacitated for most of her time at Paramount. That when she finally got better, they basically sold her contract to Warner Brothers, which was a fortuitous thing to happen because she was much more of a gritty kind of an actress. She could play gritty parts, and Paramount wasn't a place where you play gritty parts.
Right.
I mean, Warner Brothers is perfect for her. She could be the Maul to Humphrey Bogart in High Sierra.
I see. All right.
Yeah. I mean, she could be in all these really gritty roles. And so, but then she used all of that knowledge and plus the idea that if the polio comes back and if I'm confined, I still want to be part of the filmmaking process. That's when she started developing her director chops.
Right.
And that proved to be a remarkable thing for those who love film noir because she made some remarkable films. And that's the story I like to tell. These are the stories I like to share. And that's in my upcoming book. So Ida Lupino, I think is going to be my first chapter, as a matter of fact.
Good.
So yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you because I don't know if you looked at any of my other shows, but I've talked on here about the fact that I'm researching a book myself. So, what's your research process?
Well, again, it goes one of two ways. I either look for the angle and then I find a star that matches the angle. So, for example, I wanted to do a whole thing on the whole idea of the Swedish experience, smorgasbords, and who is a smorgasbord of an actor who could play Swedish parts, who could play American roles, and John Quaylen was that actor. I mean,
Right.
he fit in so remarkably, that Norwegian kind of sound, that Minnesota Norwegian sound that he had that was just so perfect. So I'm able to take the concept and then apply the actor around it, or I take the actor and say, okay, what is it that I can write about that's going to be unique to that actor? I'll give you a great example. Van Heflin, many times a star, sometimes a character actor, but to me, he always was a supporting player par excellence. He was always really remarkable, even in films that weren't very good. They called them stinkers, right? They used to call
Yeah.
stinkers. You didn't. The movie was bad writing, bad set decoration, bad everything. But they always wrote in the third paragraph, Van Heflin was remarkable. He always got the good review,
Mm.
even if the movie was bad. Well, in 1963, they came out with a movie that they sure fire thought it was going to be a remarkable movie for Van Heflin. So much so they put it out in every theater across the country, including a theater in the suburbs of Dallas, and it came out in the middle of November. And it was that movie that was on the bill um, that was playing at that Dallas theater where um, Lee Harvey Oswald entered the
Mm.
theater, sat in the movie theater, was arrested at that movie theater. And everybody remembers the grassy knoll and the book depository and the assassination of Kennedy. Everybody remembers it all happened on November 22nd. They all know it was Lee Harvey Oswald who was accused of murder of Officer Tibbets, the man he had shot, that caused him to go into the movie theater. But very few people know that one of the movies playing there that day was a movie by Van Heflin called Cry of Battle.
Huh.
And by the way, that movie, a stinker. So yeah, I like to tell. Those are the kinds of stories I like to tell.
Yeah. Going back a little bit, because we were talking about how you became interested in movies, I saw an interview where you said that Spencer Tracy was responsible for your interest in film history.
Well, Spencer Tracy is my favorite actor of the golden age. Remarkably natural on screen. Could show up any actor just by moving his eyebrows. I mean, he is so remarkable to me. When I was young, again, my mom took us to the libraries. I used to check out books about presidents, and I used to check out books about actors. And the very first one that I checked out was this these picture books that were very popular in the 60s. Let's see, I'm trying to look at it now. I think I have it right here. Let me look down here for a second.
Sure.
Where is it? Where is he? Was it the one on top? Yep, there it is. These Donald Deichner. Remember these books?
Yeah.
The films of whoever. In this case, it was the films of Spencer Tracy. And yeah, I read that book and I became a big fan. Now, when I was reading this book, it was in 1967. Okay. And I said, oh, I got to see more films by Spencer Tracy. So I started talking to my parents, and that's when we got to go see Inherit the Wind and a few other films, Judgment at Nuremberg. I mean, I got to see a lot of films of his. I wouldn't get to see It's a Mad, 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 Mad World till later. I saw a lot of the Hepburn Tracy things. And I come to find out after I've learned all of this information about Spencer Tracy, literally the week that I wanted to look him up to see what his next film was going to be, that was the week he died.
Mm.
He died the week when I thought, okay, what's going to be his next film? Well, I was trying, okay, what was his last film? And that's when I discovered Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And it really changed my life. I didn't think I was going to like him as much as I did, but I really noticed that in his acting, in the 1930s, it's so different from the shouty kind of actors, the Lee Tracys.
Right.
I love William Powell, and he's a
Yes.
natural actor too. But you can tell he's acting sometimes, not all time, because he's a remarkable actor.
Yes.
Um, James Cagney is a force of nature.
Yep.
You feel he belongs on the theater stage because he's so loud and so verbose and such a big actor. Same thing with Edward G. Robinson. You don't get that with Spencer Tracy. You don't get that with Van Heflin. You don't get that with some actors who are so natural, who are so intimate. And it's that intimacy that I love. Unfortunately, I'm the kind of actor that's very big and verbose. So I'm
Mm.
the exact opposite. But I admire Clark Gable called Spencer Tracy the actor's actor
Sure.
because he knew what he was seeing. And I think Gary Cooper had it. I think Gary Cooper had that naturalness about him as well. And that's why he's one of the greats. Henry Fonda, for the
Right.
most part, has it. Before James Stewart was made a caricature, I think he had it too. There's a
Yeah.
naturalness in the way they perform. Katharine Hepburn could be bigger than life. She could really show you, I'm acting. Look at me. Betty Davis, same way. Look at
Yes.
me. I am acting. And you don't mind that because they can pull it off. James Cagney could pull it off. But when people try to be big and it doesn't work, then the films aren't as good. I think Paul Muni could be accused of that sometimes. He could be a little bigger
Mm.
than the films were, and that's why maybe he's not as remembered as he should be, because he was a remarkable character player. He played so many different roles behind makeup. Uh,
Right.
but but I think Spencer Tracy was able to make great movies till the last movie he made
Yep.
because he underplayed so well. And I think if you overplay a little bit, it can work. Katharine Hepburn and Betty Davis were the best of that bunch. But then there are those people who, okay, I'll show you that I'm acting, but I'm not going to underplay. And that's Bogey. Bogart could just play. This is what I call the Three Little Bears analogy. Sometimes the porridge is too hot, sometimes the porridge is too cold. And that's why I think Humphrey Bogart is my second favorite actor because he plays it just right. Claude Rains could play it just right.
Yeah.
Not overplay, not underplay. You knew he was acting. He would kind of wink at you, but he never overplayed anything, and that's what makes Claude Rains just right, as opposed to let's say Lionel Barrymore or Frank Morgan, who were bigger than life. They were just big. They
Right.
were they were they were loud and they were verbose, and they could pull it off. So yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Right. Well, it's been about an hour, but I have a couple other questions. And
Sure.
one thing, well, one of my favorite subjects is pre-code movies, so I just wanted to throw that in for fun. What are some of your favorite pre-codes?
Well, it always begins with Babyface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I have a different approach to pre-code. I know that people like to think of the sultry and sexual nature of how women were portrayed. But pre-code meant also great horror films,
Yeah,
remarkable horror films that could not have been made after 1934.
social issues films.
Social issue films. But let's go back to the horror film. I don't think Frankenstein was the same after 1934.
Yeah,
I don't think The Mummy was definitely not the same. I think that King Kong couldn't have been made. Mighty Joe Young was different from King Kong. He was
right.
a little bit more robust in his villainy. Um, I don't. And again, the comedy was different during pre-code. Uh, Mae West, W.C. Fields at Paramount,
Yeah,
the Marx Brothers at
right.
Paramount were very different from the Marx Brothers at MGM.
Definitely.
So, I mean, pre-code to me is not just sex. It's the comedy, the horror, and as you say, the social realism, let's say, of Warner Brothers.
Yes.
I mean, the ferociousness of James Cagney, Edward G. Robinson, George Raft, Paul Muni. They and then later Humphrey Bogart, but way later and past pre-code.
Right.
Um, they were remarkable. You know what's fun to look at if you want to look at some of the gangster films of people you wouldn't expect? Check out Spencer Tracy at Fox
Yeah.
because his pre-code gangsters are really underrated. They weren't great films. That's part of the problem. They were written poorly, but he stands above the film. I mean, he really is quite good as a gangster. You just don't think of Spencer Tracy as a gangster. You think of him as a priest.
Right.
But he could play a gangster, and he did real well when he was at Fox. So yeah, Pre-Code to me, of course, Babyface. That's the one
Yeah.
that I really, really, really love. Um, but there are others. I mean, the sins of Nora Moran, the sins of Nora Moran. Is that it? That's
Sin.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And there's others. I mean, there's other really, really good films that I like. But I like to look at pre-code in whole as opposed to just parceling off into a genre. And I think each studio was trying to find their way during pre-code.
Yeah.
And I think they all succeeded pretty remarkably, I think.
Yeah.
So, except for Fox, their day would come with film noir, I
Yeah.
think.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, there's not as much of the Fox stuff out there that's easy to see, so I guess it's harder to judge their stuff.
well, and it's going to become much harder to see now that Disney owns that. When was the
Right.
last time you saw Fantasia in television? You don't. You
No.
don't see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on television because Disney hoards their films. And now that they own Fox, there's going to be less of Shirley Temple. There's going to be less of
Mm.
Tyrone Power and Alice Faye and Henry Fonda and Jane Darwell. That's going to be a lot less of all of that because Fox is prone to repurpose and rebrand that old 20th Century Fox product and make it only available if you subscribe. And that is a really dangerous and sad prospect.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't want to end on that note, but
No, no. Can I
uh,
talk about my books?
oh, sure.
My books, Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History. My second book, Son of Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History. And of course, my third book, Road to Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History. The other one in the series that's set to come out is going to be called The Adventures of Forgotten Hollywood, Forgotten History.
It's a good
But
title.
I do have a fourth book that I wrote last year. Actually, I wrote it during COVID and it came out last year in August. And it's called Forgotten Hollywood, Beware of the Blog. And what I did is I have 2,500 blogs that I have written. My sister went through every single one of them. Her name is Virginia Vanderwauer. My sister went through every single one of the blogs, picked out 150 of the best blogs, and we put it into a book. And each blog is put in a separate chapter. We have like 10 chapters, and we kind of put together different chapters of like maybe 8 to 10 blogs that all have a theme. I'll give you one theme, and it'll be the end theme as an example because it's the easiest theme to digest. And we end the book with a month by month look at the filmmakers who died between 2009 when I was started writing the blog and to today. And so you'd be surprised at the famous people who actually died during that time. And I
Mm.
said, okay, I want you to pick 11 of the 12 months. And the rule is it's got to be somebody who died in January. It doesn't matter what the year is, but they had to die in January. They had to die in February. They had to die in March. So that gives us 12 actors or filmmakers, right? My sister picked 11 of them, and she picked some good names. The people who died during that time frame: Elizabeth Taylor, Maureen O'Hara, Ernest Borgnine, David Bowie, um, uh, Charles Manson, Hugh Hefner, Charles Manson and Hefner weren't in movie business per se, but they tangentially has worked with the preservation of movies in Hefner's case, and of course, um, Manson had a fanatical love of wanting to be in the media business and including movies and film and song. And when that didn't happen, he went berserk. So there were wonderful stories that my sister picked out, but I said, I need to pick one. And she said, well, which one do you want to pick? And I said, I'm going to pick out, I believe it was the July, it might have been August. I think it was July, Ray Harryhausen. And she goes, who is that? I said, one of the most iconic filmmakers of all time. If we include him in this book, it will sell books for us because um, people who love films and love special effects in films are going to love the story of Ray Harryhausen. She goes, well, if you want to put Harry and the Hendersons in the book, you go right ahead. I go, it's not Harry and the Hendersons, it's Ray Harryhausen. Can you get that right? And so she was kind of funny about that. And I tell that story. I tell them at several film festivals, and every time I get a number of people saying, "I am absolutely going to buy your book because of Ray Harryhausen. Nobody ever writes about him. God bless you for that." And I said I knew that I had to include him, and I'm glad I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else? Are you appearing anywhere or lecturing anywhere?
Well, I do a lot in Southern California. I do a lot of assisted living places because
Yeah.
that's a definite audience that is still captivated by movies of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and the like. I also go to Rotaries. I've been to 105 Rotaries. I just did a Zoom Rotary last week.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and I got the film festivals coming up. Of course, got TCM. I get press pass as a film to attend the TCM festival. I've been getting press passes since the third TCM fest, and I don't get them because I work at KNX. I actually get them because of my blog site. My blog actually took third place at the Los Angeles Press Club Best Entertainment Blog of the Year in 2013.
Yeah.
Second place was James Franco, the actor.
Yeah.
I came in third. A lot of people didn't come in at all, but my blog is really on the radar of Turner. So they give me press credentials because they know that I got a good, robust following. I'm also going to be going, of course, to the Columbus Moving Pictures Festival.
Right.
Our friend Samantha. This will be my fourth visit. I love that festival. And I'm going to the Sons of the Desert International Laurel and Hardy Convention in San Diego in June.
Oh, great.
You'd be surprised how many Laurel and Hardy lovers actually love cinema as a whole. And so that's a wonderful place for me to go. And I got my new book, so I think they're going to love it. I have a couple of stories in there that are very Laurel and Hardy centric. And so they love that as well. And yeah, I'm going to keep busy, but of course I'm teaching this semester as well. So
Yeah.
really very little time off. But I like it that way. I kind of like keeping busy. Today's my day off, but here I am with you because I like that. I like the idea of being able to talk about film, being able to talk about actors and filmmakers and telling I think the stories tell themselves, but people say that I tell the stories just right, that I have an innate ability to be able to tell stories in person as well as to write them. In fact, I enjoy telling the stories in person much more so than even being an author. So it's a lot of fun. I've been blessed with an opportunity in my later part of life to do the things I like to do. I love to teach. I love to be on the radio, which I am on the weekends, doing traffic. I love talking about movies and making appearances at places and talking about the books that I write. And I love being interviewed by people who actually know what they're talking about. So today it was a real treasure, and I do appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I guess that's the right note to end on. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we had a chance to meet, and thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
And thank you too, and I want to thank your listeners and viewers as well. So I appreciate that.
Sure. Well, thank you, Manny. Take care.